What I'd like to do in the next 10 minutes is to provoke you a bit, to stir up your mental tranquility and suggest that we need to break the glass when it comes to international economic cooperation. My basic theme, my reprise is, if not now, then when? The world is living through a truly remarkable moment. It is an era-defining moment. Make no mistake, the world is not going back to the way it was. Oh, things will normalize quite a bit, but in 5 years when we say the before times, people will know you mean pre-COVID. I'm not going out on a limb here. When a few North Atlantic banks got in a jam in 2008, it was easy to think that it would just be a few years before we got back to normal. But even now, 12 years later, things are not the same. And this shock is much larger and much wider and much deeper than what happened in 2008 and 2009. Let me be more specific. For the first time since World War II, the entire world is sharing the same experience at the same time. A terrible pandemic that is robbing people of lives and livelihoods. It was sudden, traumatic, and synchronized, and is being televised so everyone sees how it is affecting everyone. It is a horrible thing. 1.5 million people have died from it directly already, and many more indirectly. Over 60 million have already fallen ill. Global poverty is rising for the first time in decades. The World Bank estimates that between 80 and 120 million people will be pushed back into extreme poverty by the end of next year. Millions of people are going hungry due to this virus. I couldn't find official estimates, but Oxfam estimates that 12,000 people a day could die from hunger linked to COVID-19, on top of those who die from the disease itself. And this is not just a problem of poor nations. There are kilometer-long food lines in Texas. Children are losing out on critical early childhood training. Reading scores and educational outcomes have suffered. Given the long-lasting impact that early childhood training has on lifelong outcomes, an OECD study finds that, quote, for nations, the impact could optimistically be 1.5% lower GDP throughout the remainder of the century, and proportionately even lower if educational systems are slow to return to prior levels of performance. The UN found, quote, the COVID pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and in all continents. Closures of schools and other learning spaces have impacted 94% of the world's student population, up to 99% in lower and middle income countries. The report continues, noting the crisis is exacerbating pre-existing educational disparities by reducing the opportunities for many of the most vulnerable children, youth, and adults, those living in poor or rural regions, girls, refugees, persons with disability, and forced displaced persons. Learning losses also threaten to extend beyond this generation and erase decades of progress, not the least in support of girls and young women's education, access, and retention. As I said, COVID-19 is an era-defining event. But I'm an optimist. I choose to think that this trauma could be a catharsis, a spark that brings out our shared humanity. The virus has created an historically unprecedented resonance in the human experience. In a sense, we're all on the same wavelength, facing the same challenges. It could be a moment when humans look around themselves and realize that we're all of us humans in this together. It could create a spirit of solidarity and cohesion, a sense of shared humanity and shared destiny, a sense that we all have to look after one another and the planet we share. If not now, then when? I'm being naive, of course, but terrible moments have often been moments when bold choices are made. Will we pull together, or will we let the epidemic tear us apart? That's the choice. And again, I say, if not now, then when? Okay, let me lower the rhetoric a bit. Actually, more than just a bit. I would like to point to two immediate, era-defining challenges for 2021. Fighting the pandemic and fighting the economic recession. I would point to a couple things that APEC cooperation could help with. First, APEC could commit to avoiding vaccine nationalism. This could be win-win because the disease will never be banished anywhere until it's banished everywhere. Even New Zealand, with its remarkable handling of the virus, faces continued threats of reinfection, and this will continue until a very large share of the world's population is vaccinated. There is a very real threat that COVID could turn into an endemic disease, which means it would be hurting lives and livelihoods for the foreseeable future. This is made more likely if there are significant populations that remain susceptible since they haven't been vaccinated. Second, APEC could undertake measures that prevent policy from messing up the international supply chains that the world will need to produce and distribute several billion doses of vaccine over the next dozen months or so. The same goes for the international production networks that have been the unsung heroes of this common crisis. If it were not for the fantastic increase in protective equipment in Asia, medical workers in Europe and North America would be facing life-threatening exposures to COVID patients without proper protection. If I were with you there in person, I might ask you to all give a big round of applause, not just for the medical workers, but for the factory workers who made the equipment that is protecting them. Concrete idea number one. This is not the time for grand designs. It's the time for pragmatic steps that leverage mutual interest. The 25th March 2020 initiative of 7 nations put together by New Zealand and Singapore to keep supply routes open is a case in point. Another concrete idea that is fleshed out in a chapter in the Vox EU ebook that Simon Evan and I edited in 2020 is to get a group of like-minded economies to agree a kind of truce. Participants would agree to at least temporarily suspend tariffs on medical equipment and commit to not imposing export restrictions. The certainty that this would impose for market access and efficient orientation of production networks would encourage production. Professors Simon Evan and Alan Winters have written up these ideas in some detail in the free-to-download ebook I mentioned, which I hope the host can share with you via the website. And I'd point out that there is a related precedence. On the 22nd of April 2020, 50 governments, including China and the United States, announced that they would maintain open and predictable trade in agricultural and food products during the pandemic. This was a good step, but it could be extended to trade in medical supplies and other measures necessary to keep supply chains working smoothly. Concrete idea number 2. Enhance transparency on policies taken. This could, for example, extend to policies in production of medical goods. APEC could create a mechanism like the Agricultural Market Information System, AMIS, that shares information on supply conditions and relevant policy changes in agricultural goods. COVID-related port restrictions could be part of it, the restrictions that are hindering shipping. APEC could establish a political and technical committee or committees to facilitate and hasten the resolution of problems and conflicts. Things are and must move incredibly fast if we are to defeat this pandemic, and this speed will surely lead to conflicts and mistakes that could be and should be resolved. Setting up the mechanisms in advance or which existing mechanisms would be used to reduce to fix the problems would reduce to the extent that policy unnecessarily slows down pandemic fighting efforts. There are many more ideas like this in the ebook that I mentioned before with Simon Evan and I that I edited back in March 2012, but I'll stop with these. Let me end by coming back to the beginning. The world is facing an epic, era-defining shock. Fighting the pandemic on the medical front and fighting the recession on the economic front will require cooperation. Cooperation that may require some to move beyond their comfort zone, but cooperation that will ultimately benefit all. And it is time to start. If not now, then when?